Now, President Obama has refused to discuss the budget with Republicans until Congress reopens the government and raises the debt ceiling. That's after 8 days of a federal hold and just over a week to go until the U.S. runs out of cash and defaults on its debt. And as RT's Marina Portnaya reports, America's partisan politics are pushing the nation and the global economy to the brink of disaster.
A 9-day government shutdown with a credit default looming in the wings. Washington's failure to so far agree on a budget or how to pay its bills has given an entirely new meaning to American exceptionalism. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are losing paychecks and social benefits because U.S. officials elected to lead this country are engaged in a bitter fiscal deadlock. On Tuesday, President Barack Obama said he would be willing to negotiate on budget issues only after Republicans agreed to reopen the federal government and raise the debt limit without preconditions. Republicans, meanwhile, are insisting on deficit reduction talks as a condition for raising the federal debt by October 17th. Members of the party have demanded also that Obama's health care be delayed or defunded in return for approving funds to end the government shutdown. Now, President Obama warned the public that an economic shutdown, the first in history, would be dramatically worse than the current reckless government shutdown. And while Washington's temper tantrum remains on full display, economist Max Wolf says the world is watching with awe and growing less impressed with the economic and political experiment otherwise known as the United States.
I do think we will see the debt ceiling get resolved. However, with each day where the dysfunction is more obvious, more out of control, and larger, it becomes harder to have faith tomorrow. It becomes harder for the markets, it becomes harder for Americans, and it becomes harder for the population of the world to have faith in brand America, government America, and people begin to ask unfortunate and unpleasant and unflattering questions about America's future.
Now, China, which owns a reported $1.3 trillion of U.S. government debt, recently reminded Washington that the clock is ticking and urged U.S. lawmakers not to repeat the mistake of 2011. That's when the debate over raising the U.S. debt ceiling led to America's credit rating being downgraded. And Japan's finance minister also recently said a failure by the U.S. to quickly resolve its political deadlock over government finances could damage the global economy. In the meantime, the U.S. government shutdown has reportedly delayed trade talks between Washington and Brussels. It has also forced President Obama to skip an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting this week, ceding valuable ground to China. Reporting from New York, Marina Portnaya, RT.
America's budget crisis is sending shockwaves across the globe, with many calling it irrational and even surreal. The federal hold has no end in sight, with both Democrats and Republicans refusing to back down. Well, let's see how it works in other democracies when lawmakers can't agree on a budget. Australia had a shutdown once in 1975. After all the budgetary squabbles, the Queen of England got to fire everybody. They had new elections and no problems like that ever since. And when Congress failed to pass a budget in Brazil about 7 years ago, it was no big deal at all, with just some limits to salaries and current expenses. In Israel, if they don't get a budget by the 31st of December deadline, they automatically revert to the one from the previous year. However, it appears in the U.S. democracy there is no such mechanism to resolve the deadlock. Renowned American intellectual Noam Chomsky explains how it evolved.
It's exceptional in the history of parliamentary democracy, and it's interesting to see what's happened. There have been significant economic changes in the past generation, the way the economy is structured. No time to go into it, but one of the effects of these changes is basically the neoliberal programs, and they're having the same kind of effect they have everywhere. They direct wealth to very narrow sectors. They increase inequality. It has an immediate effect on politics in a parliamentary democracy. As power gets more concentrated, political power does as well. So by now, elections are almost bought. It's a plutocracy, it's not a democracy. Both political parties have drifted to the right. The U.S. is still a one-party state. The business party